The neighborhood of Cedar Ridge used to feel calm, peaceful, and predictable, until the HOA decided that every homeowner owed an additional quarterly fee without warning. For months, people ignored the growing frustration, assuming the increase was temporary or necessary. But one homeowner, a quiet and detail-oriented woman named Mariah, wasn't the type to let unexplained money vanish from her bank account. She had lived in the community long enough to recognize when something didn't add up, and this fee increase made no logical sense. The HOA board, run by a trio of overly confident members, acted as though they were untouchable. They carried themselves with a smugness that came from years of controlling every aspect of community life. They had developed a pattern of brushing off complaints, shutting down questions, and intimidating anyone who dared to ask where the money was really going. To them, the increase was just another rule they imposed, expecting everyone to stay silent. Mariah, however, had always kept track of every financial change in the community. She had saved past invoices, maintenance logs, and publicly shared budgets. When the new fee arrived, she compared it to the last 2 years of documentation and noticed an odd pattern: small increases scattered throughout without explanation. It felt strategic, as if someone was hoping the residents would overlook them. That suspicion left a heavy weight on her mind, pushing her to gather more information. The HOA office itself was a place nobody liked visiting. Its glass door remained mostly closed, with paperwork stacked high and a strange tension lingering inside. The board members rarely made themselves available unless they needed signatures or approvals. But the moment Mariah walked in to request a breakdown of the increase, she felt a shift. The board greeted her with polite faces masking irritation, clearly annoyed that someone dared question them. Instead of an explanation, they dismissed her. Concerns with vague statements about rising operational costs and necessary community upgrades, none of which matched any ongoing projects. The interaction left her unsettled. Their expressions were too rehearsed, and their confidence felt unnatural, as if they were hiding behind the kind of authority no one had challenged in years. On her way out, she noticed a locked cabinet labeled "Financial Records, Restricted." Homeowners weren't normally barred from seeing financial information, and that detail alone confirmed her suspicion that something wasn't right. Later that evening, she reviewed the documents again, tracing numbers line by line. Everything pointed to missing funds, inconsistent spending, and unexplained consulting fees that kept increasing. The deeper she looked, the more she felt like she was staring at a puzzle with intentionally missing pieces. She knew that confronting the board again wouldn't work, and involving other homeowners was risky, considering how the board had intimidated people before. She needed something stronger, proof that couldn't be ignored. That was when she made the decision that changed everything: she would trigger a formal community audit. In Cedar Ridge, audits were rare and required evidence of financial mismanagement. But Mariah had collected enough anomalies to justify one. Submitting the request meant potentially making herself a target of the board, but the truth mattered more. She prepared her documentation, organized her findings, and submitted the request through the proper channels. Word spread fast. Neighbors whispered in driveways. The board panicked behind closed doors. And for the first time in years, the HOA's confident smiles faded as they realized they were losing control. The audit team, neutral, professional, and thorough, arrived sooner than expected. They requested access to every financial record, digital and physical. They unlocked cabinets the board claimed contained nothing important, and opened files no one had seen before. The board members suddenly adopted a new attitude, pretending to be cooperative while visibly nervous. Their behavior only confirmed that something much deeper was hiding in the paperwork. As the auditors worked, they discovered unusual patterns: payments to companies that didn't seem real and signatures that didn't belong to any known residents. The auditors asked for the name of the HOA's financial consultant, someone listed repeatedly in the expenses. That was when the first real crack appeared. The board refused to answer questions about the consultant. They stalled, shifted topics, and insisted everything was standard procedure. But the auditors weren't easily distracted. They followed the money trail, piecing together transactions that pointed to a person who had quietly been receiving payments from the HOA funds for nearly 3 years. Someone the homeowners had never heard of. Someone who didn't appear in any community records. Someone who seemed to exist only on the expense sheets. The secret boss of the HOA. Mariah sensed the shift long before anyone said a word. The board avoided eye contact with her. The neighborhood felt charged, waiting for something to unravel. Every move she made now mattered, because the people she had exposed were starting to realize that their long-protected secret might finally collapse. By the end of the week, the auditors had enough evidence to request an emergency meeting. Residents gathered in the community hall, unaware that they were about to hear the first shocking truth hidden behind the HOA's polished surface. Just as the meeting began, the lead auditor stepped forward with the first major revelation. And the entire room leaned forward, unaware that the real explosion hadn't even begun. The emergency meeting began with an atmosphere so heavy that even the lights seemed dimmer. Residents filled every seat, some standing along the walls, unsure why the auditors had called everyone together so abruptly. Rumors had spread throughout Cedar Ridge, but no one yet understood the scale of what was about to unfold. Mariah sat near the back, watching each board member carefully. Their once confident posture now sagged under pressure, their hands fidgeting with papers they weren't prepared to defend. The lead auditor stepped to the front, holding a folder thick with documents. Without a single word of dialogue, the room understood the gravity of the moment. The investigation had uncovered something far beyond a simple accounting mistake. The homeowners looked on as the auditors displayed charts, reports, and financial logs, revealing a massive pattern of unexplained expenses that stretched back several years. The most alarming discovery was the recurring payment to a mysterious consulting contractor named Graham Holt. This name had never been mentioned in any resident meeting, nor listed in any public HOA document. Yet his signature appeared repeatedly, stamped across budget approvals and financial transfers. According to the audit files, Graham was paid significantly, far more than any reasonable consulting job would cost for a community of this size. But what stunned the residents even more was the realization that he was not an external consultant at all. The auditors traced his address and employment history and uncovered that Graham Holt was living only 5 streets away, inside Cedar Ridge itself, despite never showing up at meetings, never voting, and never participating in any HOA event. He operated from the shadows, using the board members as intermediaries, while siphoning funds into accounts under his control. As more evidence surfaced, the connection between Graham and the HOA board became clearer. The board members had been working with him for years, allowing him to operate in secret. He did not hold an official position, yet he held more power than any elected member. He influenced decisions, funneled money through fabricated maintenance charges, and approved renovations that never happened. The residents realized that the board had essentially served as the face of a one-man underground operation. The audit findings painted a picture of manipulation and deception. Every unexplained fee increase had gone directly to support Graham's covert system. The HOA that residents trusted had become a shell, controlled by a man they didn't even know existed. The board members had acted like loyal assistants, benefiting in small ways, bonuses, waived dues, and personal favors, while Graham took most of the financial gain. Mariah, who had sparked the audit, listened as the auditors laid out proof after proof. She felt a mix of vindication and disbelief. Her suspicion had been correct, but the scale of corruption far exceeded anything she had imagined. She wondered how deeply the board feared Graham, or whether they had been willingly complicit. Every document pulled from the cabinets and digital logs only deepened the story. Tension erupted among residents as they processed the information. People who once trusted the board now realized they had been living under the control of someone who had never been elected. The board members sat motionless, unable to deny the evidence piling around them. What had once been their authority now looked like complicity. The auditors concluded that the HOA's entire structure had been compromised, and immediate corrective measures needed to be implemented. The community demanded accountability, and the auditors responded by freezing all HOA-controlled accounts. No board member was allowed to make purchases, authorize repairs, or touch community funds until a new leadership structure was installed. The auditors also recommended law enforcement involvement due to the extent of financial fraud uncovered. That recommendation sent panic across the board members' faces. Their years of secrecy were collapsing in real time. In the days that followed, the auditors continued reviewing records while drafting a final report. Meanwhile, the residents speculated about what kind of person Graham was. Some believed he was a former accountant fired years ago. Others thought he was a disgraced HOA board member trying to regain control from the shadows. Some suspected he was related to one of the board members. But no one knew for certain. His house remained quiet, blinds drawn, as if he were observing everything from behind the glass. Mariah felt the weight of the situation increasing. It was no longer just a matter of money. It had become a question of trust, power, and how one man had managed to manipulate an entire community without showing his face. Every piece of evidence painted Graham as someone intelligent, calculating, and deeply familiar with HOA systems. He knew how to hide in plain sight. As the internal investigation expanded, the auditors discovered a separate spreadsheet hidden within a password-protected folder on the HOA office computer. This file documented long-term financial projections, future community expenses, and planned fee increases, none of which had ever been announced to residents. It showed that Graham intended to continue increasing fees for years to come, gradually extracting more money while maintaining his invisibility. This revelation disturbed the homeowners more than anything else. It meant he wasn't done. He had been planning to keep manipulating the community until someone finally uncovered him. His control had been strategic, subtle, and long-term. The final blow came when the auditors confirmed that the maintenance problems, used to justify the fee increases, didn't actually exist. Places marked for repair, like fencing, pool equipment, and lighting systems, showed no signs of work. Invoices from contractors were forged or issued by companies with no traceable history. Every dollar had been part of the scheme. The board members attempted to distance themselves from Graham, but their signatures appeared too many times to deny involvement. They had allowed him to operate and had personally benefited. Their silence, loyalty, and fear had been the fuel that kept Graham's operation running. As the second week of the audit ended, the auditors prepared for a final community assembly. Residents expected the board members to be removed entirely. Everyone anticipated that Graham would finally be confronted. But Graham had stayed unusually quiet. It wasn't until the night before the final meeting that something strange happened. Several residents reported seeing a car leaving Graham's driveway, loaded with boxes. His porch light, usually off, flickered as if someone had been moving quickly inside. By morning, his house looked abandoned, curtains pulled open, mailbox emptied, and no sign of activity. When the auditors looked into Graham's bank accounts that afternoon, they found the balances drained. He was gone. But what he didn't know was that the auditors had uncovered one last clue, one that revealed where he had been getting his power all along, and what he had truly been after. The morning after Graham Holt disappeared, Cedar Ridge felt different. The streets, once quiet and orderly, buzzed with tension. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, exchanging theories, rumors, and whispers. No one could believe that a man who had controlled their community from the shadows for years had vanished without a trace. The HOA board, now stripped of any authority, sat in stunned silence, each member knowing that their actions had been exposed and their credibility destroyed. Mariah walked through the neighborhood, observing the mix of shock, anger, and relief on her neighbors' faces. People who had once blindly followed the board now felt empowered. They shared stories of unexplained fees, mysterious repairs, and interactions with the board that now made sense in light of Graham's influence. Everyone realized how deeply manipulation had permeated their lives, from simple fee increases to hidden financial schemes. The auditors reconvened for the final community meeting, armed with the last pieces of evidence. Residents filled the hall, some clutching printouts, others just watching with wide eyes. Every chart, every spreadsheet, every document previously hidden was laid bare. The pattern was undeniable. Graham had orchestrated nearly every major decision the HOA had made for the last 3 years, using the board as his puppets. His payments, invoices, and consulting fees had been meticulously disguised, with board members unknowingly signing off, or willingly participating, in his scheme. The auditors reconvened for the final community meeting, armed with the last pieces of evidence. Residents filled the hall, some clutching printouts, others just watching with wide eyes. Every chart, every spreadsheet, every document previously hidden was laid bare. The pattern was undeniable. Graham had orchestrated nearly every major decision the HOA had made for the last 3 years, using the board as his puppets. His payments, invoices, and consulting fees had been meticulously disguised, with board members unknowingly signing off, or willingly participating, in his scheme. But the biggest revelation stunned the room into silence. As the auditors presented Graham's hidden agenda, they discovered a separate series of files, documents that had been cleverly encoded. These files revealed the full extent of his vision for Cedar Ridge. He had been building a network of influence and control beyond just the HOA. His goal was to manipulate property values, direct community investments, and even influence decisions that affected the wider city. He had planned to profit from every angle, keeping the neighborhood under his secret rule while residents believed they were in control. Residents gasped as they realized the audacity of the plan. It wasn't just about fees or budgets. Graham had aimed to dominate every financial and social decision in Cedar Ridge without anyone knowing. The board's role had been purely functional, paper pushers and shields for his activities. As the auditors outlined the steps for accountability, it became clear that Graham had exploited a loophole in HOA regulations, a system that allowed external consultants to operate without scrutiny. Residents immediately demanded stricter rules, full transparency, and permanent oversight to prevent any similar future manipulation. Plans were drawn to remove the board, hold them accountable for their role, and elect a new, transparent leadership. Yet even with the board neutralized, the lingering question haunted everyone: where had Graham gone? The auditors had traced some digital trails, but he had been careful. Bank accounts were emptied, emails deleted, and personal records scrubbed. He had vanished as mysteriously as he had arrived, leaving behind a community that had been both victim and witness to his shadow empire. Despite the chaos, the neighborhood slowly began to rebuild. Mariah, now recognized as the catalyst for exposing the truth, worked with auditors and remaining residents to establish stronger financial controls. She helped create new processes for fee approvals, auditing, and community involvement. Residents began attending meetings with a renewed sense of engagement, determined never to allow another invisible power to manipulate them. Yet the legend of Graham Holt lingered. Some claimed to see a figure in a distant street, always observing, always disappearing before anyone could confront him. Others whispered that he had insider connections in other communities, suggesting that Cedar Ridge was only the beginning. The fear of his return kept residents vigilant, but it also forged a sense of unity. People who had once been passive were now proactive, refusing to be sidelined by secrecy or deception again. In the weeks that followed, the HOA offices were cleaned, reorganized, and secured. Auditors implemented new transparency measures, including public access to all expenditures, regular financial updates, and mandatory audits every year. Residents felt safer, empowered, and informed. Yet, Mariah understood that the true lesson wasn't just about finances, it was about attention, vigilance, and courage. One individual questioning a suspicious increase had uncovered a conspiracy that had long gone unnoticed, proving that even the most confident authorities could crumble under scrutiny. The neighborhood returned to a semblance of normalcy, but stories of Graham Holt circulated for years. Parents warned children about unseen influences, neighbors remained more vigilant than ever, and community meetings became more active, participatory, and democratic. People celebrated the removal of corruption while remaining cautious, remembering the man who had quietly controlled their lives. Ultimately, Cedar Ridge learned a powerful truth: power can be hidden, but it is never absolute. One person asking the right question, one act of observation, can unravel years of secrecy. And even when a manipulator vanishes without a trace, the community he tried to control becomes stronger, wiser, and more united than before. Mariah walked past Graham's abandoned house one last time, noting the empty driveway and the quiet stillness that replaced his presence. She knew the neighborhood had been changed forever. The HOA would never be the same, the board had been exposed, and the ghost of Graham Holt would remain a cautionary tale for generations. As the sun set over Cedar Ridge, the streets glowed with a renewed sense of hope and vigilance. The residents had reclaimed their community, learned the cost of complacency, and discovered the power of asking questions. What started as a single inquiry about a fee increase had uncovered a secret boss, dismantled a hidden empire, and transformed an entire neighborhood. And though Graham Holt might never be found, his story had one final effect: it reminded everyone that attention, courage, and persistence could outshine even the most hidden of threats. Cedar Ridge would thrive, not in fear, but in knowledge, transparency, and unity.